The sound of being. A sound is the cause and reason for the world's existence. It is a wave that is resisted by something that is a non-entity. But a wave is part and parcel for the existence of energetic particles. Therefore, it should be said that it is resisted by something which is also a wave, but possessing other properties. Perhaps they are not exactly opposites in many cases, but are certainly different. Thus, a sound is a kind of collision with the non-identical. Only a coalescence of elementary particles with identical physical characteristics, which emerged as one and existed for the same length of time, is soundless, if the environment had failed to transform them in various ways. It's a case when the particles in relation to each other do not represent something unequal or capable of resisting. Any energetic particle emerging from the world of anti-energy as a model of another mode of existence immediately begins to interact with whatever surrounds it. A particle is unable to exist all by itself for a long time, but endlessly comes into contact with others and acts in collaboration with them. The existing undergoes constant change. The fields, the radiation of such combinations organized in a specific way, are already a somewhat resisting medium for the wave. The fields also affect each other while producing a sound, but the sound is heard only by those who can perceive it. So, sound is the most important sign of being, for it indicates an interaction which is impossible without the participation of at least two objects that are not identical to each other. The manifestation of this difference is the basis of the developing universe. Sound, as an external manifestation of the energy impulse, which in heaven, where there is no air for transmitting vibrations of the rays accessible to human hearing, is of a different nature. The sound in a vacuum, or in the space of rarefied particles, removed from each other so far that their contact is almost impossible, tend to be energetic rays, which I will call a kind of condensed formation or a clot. They generate a lengthy, intensive interaction among themselves. This sound cannot be heard by a human being, but the contact of elementary particle flows inside an energy clot or a complex impulse causes oscillation of the space around the interacting flows, causing a spatial exertion within the clot that makes it sound. How can I explain this so that you understand? A clot is a thought form emanating from the universal brain, and inside this matter, which is organized as a separate interaction of flows of elementary particles, there is a certain space. To be more precise, I will say that this is a field which is neutral in meaning. It changes due to the interaction of flows, because the flows, like individual particles, come into contact with each other, and a certain voltage arises from the potential difference. The fields spread in the air, and you hear the oscillation of the constituent particles which are organized in a specific way. In a vacuum environment, the fields arising from the interaction of certain energy rays inside the clot or thought form cannot be heard by the human ear. In fact, the range of frequencies perceived by human beings is very limited, even in an air environment, not to mention a vacuum one. But energy entities, even those ones which people evolve into having dropped their flesh, that is, the souls of those who had died on earth, hear the heaven which seems silent to you, as a combination of different sounds. The sound of creation is Om, or Om, as the Buddhists call it. People who have departed from their bodies after death, or who know how to do this while still alive, but in a state of an altered consciousness, can hear this sound. It permeates the entire universe. And its great buzz says that creation is continuous in the phase of being. The demiurges of some new future energy formations appear in the universe one after another, and they represent some energy clots of enormous power. They, born as a result of this sounding impulse, are tuned to certain frequencies of radiation, which are always different, for they are appointed by the universal brain to a certain ministry. But how do the demiurges choose their own frequency? They are assigned to it by the universal brain. Each sound impulse is different. The sound is heard as if it was a single one, but its frequencies in the great radiant spectrum are innumerable. "That's not possible," a terrestrial physicist would exclaim. "The frequency directly affects the pitch of the sound." "But much is different in the world of 10 dimensions," the universal brain would answer, if it could talk to people. The sound, which is booming and seems to be the same, produces myriads of frequencies of a gigantic range. But where does the sound of Om come from? I foresee the question. The universal brain has no matter in itself. It is purely an energy formation. So what can produce a sound? Heaven, I would say. By heaven, I mean the whole aggregate of objects, both material and energetic, as well as the universal brain, radiating an impulse of colossal power. For the sound that generates something new directs this mute impulse to certain material objects, colliding with which the impulse becomes audible. I definitely speak of sound as a conception which is speculative for a biological being, for it is heard only through spiritual hearing. A sound is a ground zero. The sounding energy impulse is a formidable formation, for the sound is a sign that energy and matter, when they encounter each other, become two sides of the same thing. But where did the very first sound come from? People will be surprised, since once there was nothing. And I will say, from the very beginning, matter was released from its captivity of energy. The expansion of space from the neutrino accumulation continued in silence for a brief period of time. For such an expansion, the release of neutrino captives would have been possible without the help of the universal brain, until an environment with opposite properties arose, the prime cause of the sound. Matter is a product of energy, and at the same time, energy is the basis of matter. It is the indissoluble unity of the two hypostases of existence. But if energy is a universal image or form of things existent, matter cannot arise anytime because it requires certain conditions. In the expanding, newly formed universe, the accumulation of neutrino particles, which store the properties and features of objects of the previous universe, represent arbitrary and most bizarre combinations. And therefore, the objects that appear in newly formed fields, the most varied in their properties, have a very different, sometimes unprecedented nature. They are not only energy formations, but also primary matter, the energy particles that have already appeared under the influence of certain fields generated by random accumulations of neutrinos or other particles sometimes join each other in a certain way, and, in other words, in a certain order, which is the essence of matter. But this does not mean that the revealed substance is similar to the one which existed in the former universe. Simply by itself, the formed order has become some kind of reverse side of the initial chaos. For every offset of being is, first and foremost, a division of opposites. Supreme Mind was created after the universe arose. At some point, when it became required in the universe to balance birth and death, plus and minus, the need for the universal brain appeared. For any occurrence is based on necessity, and it, having arisen, began to create by its own laws. That is when Om first came into being during the creation of the world. The measured Om is the sound of the conscious creation, which is different from the chaotic, uneven sound of the spontaneous creation of the world. I'll tell you about the repeated sound of Om, which comes from the universal brain. This sound had not existed before it appeared, for rhythm is an order, and the original self-formation of the universe was chaotic. The initial impulse was created by accidental contact of neutrinos and their unification into interacting flows. Then they formed the impulse that laid the foundation for the universe. This happened in silence, for still there was no environment that would have resisted the revealed impulse, the first radiation or field. Om is a sign of order, and therefore this sound indicates a reasonable source. The Supreme Mind is the primary source, which established order in the emerging universe. The sound of Om can be heard even by a living person, but in a state of altered consciousness. This is a heavy, drawling and rhythmic sound, some kind of beat, like a heartbeat. Rhythmic heartbeats tell you that your spiritual foundation is a single whole with the heart of the universe. The bell-sounding Om is not that kind of gorgeous, delightful music that can be heard by the soul of a radiant person who has shed the shackles of the body. Being able to hear the rhythmic sound of creation is not given to all human souls in the invisible world, but only to those who have already left the house of purification and passed a layer that corresponded to their spiritual state in early life. This is what happens. The soul, when purified, acquires other, higher vibrations, and it needs to listen to Om, for it booms to show that to create means to unite the low and the high in creation. The energy formation with the highest frequency, the universal brain, emits a low, outward booming sound. This is the image of a vibrant house, where light and darkness are united into an indissoluble combination. Realizing this, the soul ponders over its further existence. For the sake of light, it should perform reasonable deeds, observe a certain proportion. By helping the forces of light, it keeps those energy entities that it opposes, the part of the low-frequency energy that allows its enemy to survive, but serve light at the same time. Uniformity of the sound of Om indicates continuous creation. When it declines, Om will sound less often until it stops altogether. And the last sound of the perishing universe will be the sound of the last disintegrating thought form or disembodied entity. But nobody will be able to hear this sound. It will be a terrible trumpet sound embodied in itself. But the loss of consciousness, the disruption of the last pair of unequal elementary particles in the universe, will happen in an inaudible manner. Om, perceived by the spiritual healing of John, the apostle of Christ, meant the Word, which was at the beginning. The melody of creation is a booming heavenly sound, Om. Please answer, is bell ringing not similar to it? It is, you will say, but there is nothing else in the air, apart from the bell ringing. That is not true, I would say. You do not notice it, but other creatures of mine, who have acquired or originally have spiritual vision, see that heavenly creatures appear around the ringing bells. They look like certain rays, and these rays are sent to help people. For the bells which are cast by people are their demiurges. The rays help people because they were created by the people's will, those who cast the bells and those who ring them. Creatures return to the Creator. This law is eternal in the universe. Bell ringing is important for the human soul, for it is identical to the sound of heaven, which the universal brain emits. The soul needs to hear it constantly. These vibrations give one hope for the existence of an unquenchable celestial light, and in the world of darkness that reigns on earth, one needs only to aspire to it with all of one's being. So listen to the bells. They represent a painful breakthrough of a soul to heaven. The sound of the field around the energy impulse is generated by the resistance of the medium. Knowing the impulse and hearing the sound of the field, I understand what is opposing it, and I come to the rescue, if this impulse is important for light. Also, there are fields around you. Hearing their sounds, I understand what is opposed to you, and I try to remove the obstacle if you are dear to me. But if you are dark, the sound of the field can go beyond the sounds I perceive, and then those whom you serve become your helpers. The universal brain knows it has allotted all with the necessary frequencies what kind of creation each sound should make. But only those who have the will and free choice of behavior are able to make different sounds. And therefore, there are sudden distortions of the harmoniously sounding great symphony of the universe planned by the Supreme Mind, and the universal brain catches them, although it cannot immediately understand from whom exactly these sounds emanate, for they do not reach it immediately. The noise in the universe is unimaginable, and these are the unplanned vibrations of human beings that bring chaos to it. In fact, everyone in the universe fulfills what one is destined for except the human species living on Earth. Yes, a human being is a contradictory dual creature, but it was an amazing discovery for me and for Him who created me what a small number of people understand their true destiny: to become co-creators of the universe, and for this to radiate outwards a high frequency and spiritual energy, repeatedly amplified by permanently overcoming the low frequencies in themselves. The universe is densely populated, but only a human being brings confusion and chaos into it. The role of people in the universe is great, and people do not know to what extent. And the universal brain, hearing the increasing roaring sound of destruction emanating from Earth, begins to make attempts to start from scratch on my planet, for it is improper for the universe to be destroyed because of petty, evil, vain thoughts of a human being of the Earth. Firewood said to the milk, "I give fire. The fire warms man, and he lives." Milk answered, "I give life to man too, for without me babies cannot survive." And I said to both of them, "To make life possible for man, I gave much to him, and made my impulse the core of his soul. Why does he bring so much chaos into the universe? Man does not know that he had to be either milk or a warming fire for the universe, and he becomes the cause of its death. I look in mute horror at the fact that the universe is now ready to get rid of humanity, and I cannot keep on saving it infinitely, because there are goals higher than human existence on the planet of Earth." Music is both the oldest and the newest. Music is both the beginning and the end of everything. This is an amazing feature of the Supreme Mind. In order to find music, the soul enters the body to hear the sound, not just to perceive it as a sign of the field. Music is truly a heavenly field. This is the only thing that exists, for the universe is a combination of energy impulses that can be expressed by sounds. For the soul, music is a designation of an energy medium that it wants or does not want to immerse into. But initially, it is the material the soul is made of. The very content of the soul is music. And the fact that a person attracts or, on the contrary, repels you, means that you have or do not have a lot in common with him musically. In other words, it means that your soul perceives the energy field surrounding that person as either nourishing or destructive for it. Music, composed by people, indicates for heaven what the human soul is attached to, earth or heaven. Composing music means to catch some harmonic combinations of sounds around you, and these are the combinations per se that make composers. By catching certain sounds and imprinting them for further reproduction by other people, they thereby organize an energy space around themselves. The more earthly the music is, and the more often it sounds, the more intensified the vibrations of the earth become. Music inspired by the earth becomes a kind of protecting veil for the planet. Celestial harmonies, which penetrate the compositions, open the windows in the frequency veil of the earth, and much higher vibrations come through them. Therefore, bearing this in mind, let the music sound which exalts the soul and brings heaven closer. Music is the expression of the apparent in the world of fiction. The fact that the soul reacts so sensitively to the sounds arranged in a harmonic series indicates its divine origin. For sounds are energy rays. They manifest themselves in a soul in some obvious way. The soul hears the sound in the invisible world, and in the visible one, a special hearing organ is given to a human being to catch a sound that can be the source of danger for the embodied being, and of joy as well, if it is music. The ears catch the sounds, but the soul that knows what it really is becomes selective, separating the sounds that are harmonious and pleasing to it from those which are unpleasant and scary. One can judge about the degree of sophistication of people's souls, its proximity to the heavenly, by what music they consider to be great. Suffering, delight, intentions, everything can be expressed by music. The subtlest shades of any feeling, the tangle and clashing of feelings, a naive perception of the world, and the soul's deepest knowledge of its laws hidden from the mind. Music is a roll call of the heavenly fields with the soul. You love the music which conforms to your sophistication. Therefore, the music that tugs at your heartstrings is able to express and accurately designate your completeness or insufficiency. The music which causes involuntary tears determines your spiritual peak, your boundaries. But do all people cry when they hear the harmonies that overwhelm them? Not everyone is in a field that can determine their boundaries. Many people do not hear sounds at all. Others simply do not know about the existence of such harmonies. They do not encounter them on earth. Folk music is something that might not touch the soul of a person belonging to this particular nation, if they do not coincide in time, if the music is ancient, composed centuries ago. But by changing and making it more complicated, by weaving it into contemporary melodies, the impact of such ancient music can become amazing. Music is a tool of transformation, which may be called constancy in motion. This is the only constancy that gives support to the spirit. I compare music with water that flows over a stone. Both are changeable, for each moment is unique in the world. But water and stone remain water and stone, and will stay the same until they exhaust the quality that I have given to them as a form of matter. Music is necessary for the human soul, for it is the image of an invisible world, and, even more, a different kind of existence. Influencing the soul, shedding tears from the eyes, or giving inspiration, joy, hope for resurrection, music sheds light on how the invisible world is able to determine the path for people and guide them to great achievements. Or, on the contrary, it can debilitate and plunge into despair. Music is an extraordinary means for healing the soul. If you are in a state of despair, sadness, fear, helplessness, if you feel bitter and abandoned, I enter you with the sounds of heavenly harmonies. Do not look for me where human passions are imprinted in sounds, but where the composer, feeling me, has expressed his sensation in heavenly sound combinations, in the music sublime and alienated from the terrestrial. Everything that is dedicated to me will comfort you to some extent. Leaving behind the terrestrial burdens of the world and ascending to heaven, not the real, but notional one, will appease you. For in heaven, just laws reign, and justice is the only thing that can truly comfort the soul torn by suffering. Human life is a musical composition, for at any time we hear, not physically but spiritually, the sounds emanating from a person. They signify the state of his mind, which is a very complex combination of the spirit's vibrations. The melody of life is the result of the choice you make each and every second. And that is where the key to the stunning impact of some music on the sensitive soul lies. It sees the possibility of harmony for itself. A person is not able to explain the upheavals of the soul, for it is beyond the mind. But the soul knows that the wave, vibration, frequency is proof of the level of the medium's radiance. Harmony makes a person cry from inexplicable delight. These are the tears of his soul, striving for the light, sometimes inaccessible when locked in a physical shell. The basis of the soul is light, and therefore its radiation in a musical composition is so intertwined with the inner search for light around oneself. There are people who do not seek it and do not recognize it, but I see the torment of their souls under the burden of reason. The rays of despondency and depression emanate from them into osmos. The music of such souls is a low hum and a howl, despite the external well-being of life. The soul tries to secure the sacred core at any price, but to seek light means to shine itself, and out of fear of being finally extinguished, the soul hides the spark of God as deeply as possible. A soul that does not seek light and does not notice it anywhere cannot be a high-frequency formation, for light is always the supreme vibration and a saturating source of vital energy. The moan of a depressed soul is its fear of total exhaustion and disappearance. Such souls, having approached the true light or sensing its approach, may fail to recognize it immediately. It takes time for the light source to cease hurting them. Let the music wash over the body to make the soul come to life. You need to choose those harmonies which are excruciating and inexplicitly excite you. But if the soul takes the trouble to overcome the painful effects of melodic flows, a window to the world of harmony will soon open before it. I am familiar with such waves, which initially caused suffering and turned everything which is clear into something shaky, unsteady, and vague. While enduring the suffering, I gained a different vision of the soul. Clarity was restored, but at the same time, it surpassed many times the previous one. Being unable to see the way you do, I see deeper and in a more accurate way. The sky has an ability to illuminate the soul, but there is no room for the torturous evil in the souls where light is. Evil creeps into a shifty soul. Therefore, people should be illuminated from within. But what is the illuminant? Faith in the Lord, who has created life on earth, will illuminate a soul filled with doubts. But how can we place faith in it? Only the melodies of heaven can help. Only music can create a state when faith can be born within the soul. But what kind of music? So here is what I have to say. Heavenly sounds are great rays which plunge the soul into a state of eternal ecstasy. And how can heaven be heard on earth among the hardships of life and being in a state of constant torment? Heaven is energy. If you find the strength to think about it constantly, you will eventually hear the sounds that cannot be explained. But this heavenly music sounds in your soul as a message about the harmony which is possible in heaven, but impossible on earth. For here Satan captures human souls in its net of fear, doubts, and evil. You will hear harmonious sounds in heaven after leaving earth, if your souls are magnanimous. But if you are petty, then a grinding sound and a metallic knocking will be your grief in heaven. Constant thoughts about heaven are a significant strain for the mind. Your soul already knows everything, but how can this knowledge be directed to the brain? If you think like this, heaven is not empty space, but a great vibrant house, and the forms of life in it are beyond human understanding. But it is a beautiful house in which there is a place for me as well. Then your mind, being accustomed to this thought, will begin to seek evidence of another being nearby. In order to discover the forms of life that cannot be perceived by your senses, do the following. Strike the bottom of a glass vessel with a coin. You see the coin lying at the bottom, but the ringing sound is still the coin, a kind of its hypostasis. You will not see the ringing nearby. You have just heard it, but it seems to be enclosed in the coin, doesn't it? So the visible world is, you can perceive it, but its main property is to be a dwelling of invisible worlds. As the hidden energy of ringing lies in the coin, so the manifested world possesses an ability to be a source of unmanifested energies. Is it difficult to perceive this? Probably, but I'm trying to make things simple so that you can understand, at least approximately, how the universe is organized. Any material object is a source of certain energies that can be organized as a harmonious world. To be able to do this, the energy only needs a direction to follow, because what you see in telescopes is just the smallest part of the present universe, which represents a myriad of energy flows organized in a special way. The music that the soul hears while concentrating is the one your soul deserves. Many composers find their harmonies in their souls, and, according to what your ears hear, you can judge about the soul of the composer. A sound is a call of rays emitted by a certain creature. It is true for any frequency sounds in osmos, both the very high and the very low ones. Having reached its destination after disembodiment, the soul does not hear all the sounds, but only those for which it is tuned. If the soul is radiant, its destiny will be beautiful and inspiring melodies. The soul finds others of its kind in accordance with these melodies and does not feel abandoned. But the one that served not me, but darkness, will hear low, buzzing vibrations, fake melodies, imperishable and sorrowful moaning. These sounds are emitted by similar souls. It will hear this sinister music until its energetic shells, the models of earthly affections, disappear, and it ascends, having cleansed itself of sin in the lunar dwellings. I want to say that after the death of your crude and material body, you end up in something like a colossal concert hall, and what music you will listen to for many years depends on whom you served during your earthly life, me or Satan. Hearing music awaits everyone, either beautiful or horrific. The fact is that a radiant soul, striving in life for elevated and spiritual purposes, has access to those energy layers where the sounds are similar to the organ. They are harmonious, and after leaving Earth, such a soul falls into a layer that is consonant to it in the literal sense of the word. Those souls which are happy with the vibrations of darkness in their earthly lives, after death fly away to where these vibrations are, and they are clearly heard in their own terrible way. Dissonant sounds, which frighten the soul, are the sounds of destruction. Low vibrations are heard by the soul as the dying of something. That is the reason why they are frightening. So, at the end of time, the soul of a certain person realizes that a trumpet voice will be heard. This is the sound of death for all that exists. But, if you know this, why do you not know how to avoid such horror? Why do the low vibrations of evil that you are infused with in life fail to frighten you? After all, you will retire into those spheres which are consonant to you. How is it possible, you will ask, that some sounds are here and others are there? Is the universe not a common hall where you can feel and hear both? No, it is not. The sounds of creation and harmony are pure. They sound only in those energy layers where they are able to exist, incarnate, develop, and improve. When their being ceases to be expedient, their high frequencies gradually become lower, and they transfer to other energy layers, where low vibrations, having become a common background or filling of these layers, accelerate their destruction. The souls which have discovered it after the death of the body cannot change anything, for they correspond to this low vibration radiation. They are not able to transfer to high frequency layers because they represent low frequency formations. They are oppressed, being killed by the awareness of their deafness to the voice of heaven, which they suffered from during their lifetime on earth. Once a man asked me, "Lord, I am so tired of living. Please take me to you." "What sounds do you hear in your soul?" I asked. "Terrible ones," answered the man. "It is unbearable to hear such terrible sounds." "Live on," I said. "Only on earth can you rectify the music in yourself for the better. The sky is the abode of souls, but each soul finds itself exactly the space that was consonant with it in its lifetime. Therefore, abandon hope to see me if you die now. I am where music illuminates the soul instead of making it shudder with horror." The meaning of the parable is that life on earth is the path to eternity, where it is impossible to improve oneself without undergoing a long and painful transformation. And therefore, as long as you live on earth, rush to the light as fast as possible in order to prepare your soul for the realm of eternal harmony, which manifests itself even in sound combinations. I want to say something about the music of heaven, what the departed soul hears. These are not the sounds you can hear on earth. There are no sounds in the usual sense that you use pronouncing the word sound in a vacuum. The soul has some other kind of hearing. Whatever harmonies or disharmonies it captures and perceives as sounds depends on the degree of its sophistication. People who know about the magnificence of the invisible world, its eternal essence, enjoy such melodies that would cause irrepressible tears of delight if you heard them in your lifetime. Those who recklessly believe in the superiority of matter over the spirit, or even deny its existence, will hear a wild and mournful rumble, or nothing at all. The vibrations of their souls are able to catch only what is akin to them. What I'm saying about music is that you should think about the following question in advance. What will I hear in the eternal world? This can be determined in your lifetime. Think about it. What kind of sounds make me cry with joy? And what kind of sounds reach out to my heart and soul? And you may rest assured, if these sounds are harmonious, then you will hear them in the heavenly world. Just be honest about it. What kind of music is not just delightful, but goes straight to the bottom of your heart? No villains can be stunned by the majestic sounds of Bach. Those of Wagner, perhaps, yes. The rapture and power of evil sound strong. But the Song of Solvik by Grieg touches only a radiant soul and makes it cry. And Stabat Mater by Pergolesi will draw tears of those who managed to take the agonizing lot of the Blessed Virgin for their own. The cheerful spatter of Mozart's melodies make the soul glow. How gloomy Beethoven is, who forged an astounding world of sounds out of his own deafness. The din of the emerging universe, with all its light and dark sides, are heard as if from an underground cave. Heaven became a source of music for the great composers of the earth. But in fact, everything is precisely there, in the energy thought forms, both the roar of the planet that the demiurge still has to create and the eternal heavenly bells. Music is the energy structures which fill and surround a human being. It is a world of energies that can be embodied in sound. The composer begins to hear the surrounding energy from within, the singing space, and this becomes possible only with the resonance of the internal and external. Musical phrases, which he hears and expresses in a certain way, is a mirror of his own energy fields, interacting with the external ones. Music is the greatest of the arts. It depends entirely on heaven for all the harmonies, which a composer's soul is able to capture, live there. Real music is not born in the brain, but the soul indicates to the brain what heavenly harmonies are consonant with it. By the music penned by a composer, you can judge what his soul is like. But still, I cannot understand. Why do composers base their works on low vibrations and dissonant sound combinations? They are created by darkness, after all, and there is still so much darkness in your life, why should it be asserted even more? People admire the so-called avant-garde music, but it is evil and fills me with bitterness and resentment. What made you so blind to call low vibrations new music, which lead to the destruction of harmony? Believe me, there are numerous melodies in heaven. By this word I have called the energy frequencies, which only your soul can transform into pure and exalting harmonies. Why are people reluctant to make their way to these high frequencies? What makes them hunt for low vibrations, which can only create something contradicting the universal principle of harmony? Though far from everyone is granted with a sensitive brain, the human being is to blame for his imperfection in many ways. Not everyone can be a composer, as you understand, but why is there no one who is able, having called to the light, to catch a ray coming from us? This ray is the basis of creativity, the ability to give birth to harmonious creations. Music has always been and will always be, but it is going through turbulent times now. The world is mirrored in low vibrations, and music, as a mirror, reflects the current state of the human spirit. Singing is a sign of love for a world of heavenly harmony, but the deafness of your soul makes you lovers of the world of Satan. Otherwise, how can it be explained that you are singing the music that cannot be called music? For the ascending soul, upon departing from the flesh, it comes as no surprise that it loses the possibility to control this flesh, as it is surrounded by certain sounds. The world to which the soul departs, being aware of itself as an invisible rational substance, is full of unfamiliar sounds, their striking combinations, and the soul begins to understand that the most ephemeral thing in the world of matter, music, turns out to be the most durable reality. Moreover, it is what exists in both worlds at the same time. The nature of the music of another world is different. In fact, it is the music that affects the soul directly, without the help of a physical organ for hearing. But it is music. Something invisible. Souls do not immediately discover the connection between impulses of light and sounds, is perceived as music, and, therefore, gives hope that the surrounding world is not completely different. It is just another side of the familiar world. And it is music that gives this understanding to the soul. That is why it is so important what kind of music a person listens to in this lifetime on earth. The one that gives a foretaste of a grandiose, radiant, imbued with the deepest meaning world, where each element is meant to fulfill a high, non-accidental purpose, gives peace to the soul which has slipped out of the body. Dissonant, or monotonously rhythmic music, beloved in earthly life, assigns the soul to the layers, where it is not so splendid, complete, and restoratively calm. The music of another world presents an image, recreates the level of that energy space where the embodied soul feels comfortable. But for the record, there are also higher layers where the ascent of the soul and its assimilation to new conditions of being can be easier. The wave field, which it has arrived at, gives rise to harmonious sounds that are different from the general background music, which lasts for such a short time that the soul is unable to remember it, but notes its beauty with delight. For the soul to be in its previous natural environment of mournful or monotonously rumbling sounds for eternity and knowing, at the same time, about the existence of extraordinary jubilant harmonies is unbearable, for it is now starting to feel the destructive impact of such vibrations. It is necessary to break away from the suffocating sounds, but this is extremely hard work, coupled with painful sensations. Silence is also music, but it cannot be heard by an ordinary, not endowed with a special hearing person. Silence is like a house where the tenants do not know about the existence of the other tenants. Silence creates an impression of emptiness, lack of sound, the expectation of a sound to come on the mind. And this repeated disappearance of sound means only one thing: you do not perceive some waves as constantly arising, which are, as a matter of fact, incessant, invisible lightning. Radiations which are not perceived by your hearing organ, and which you take for silence. Silence is the way to save a person from the impact of the harmful energy flows which I have endowed his flesh with. The hearing organ perceives sound at a very limited range, and this is because lower and higher frequencies accompanied by sound would cause irreparable damage to one's psyche. Very low frequencies are destructive. They cause a feeling of terror, for the soul knows from its life in heaven, low frequencies destroy light. But such vibrations are dangerous not only for light. Matter, as a house of the soul, organic matter, living flesh, can exist only within a moderate range. Very high frequencies are also unnecessary for the carnal shell of a human being, for they signify a transition to a radiant existence. And these vibrations are not inherent to the body either. A high-frequency sound can be heard by some living organisms and even be produced by them. But all animals exist in different frequency ranges that can completely or partially coincide with the human range, and, therefore, high or low frequencies, which are natural for animals and excessive for humans, do not destroy their flesh. These are their inherent ranges. Those low frequencies, which are audible to a human being, may not be perceived by bats, some birds and insects, which use ultrasound, which is not perceived by human hearing. The frequency range perceived by the ear protects you from being destroyed. But you can argue, is it not the same whether the destructive frequency sounds or not, if it affects the body anyway? Audible sounds and imperceptible sounds affect the brain in different ways. Hearing not only warns you about danger or allows you to have pleasure, it does not just give you the opportunity to learn something, whether concrete or speculative. Hearing indicates some damage in you. If the signal does not reach the brain, and it fits into the sound range of the human ear, the brain reacts in a wrong way to the frequencies which produce the sound in the atmosphere. The brain receives the signal in a different way, because the frequency still affects the living organism, but this signal is distorted. The fact that a human being should hear this frequency is recorded in his program, and such a frequency should influence him in the form of a sound. If deafness deprives him of nightingale singing, it means that the voice of the bird does not affect him as an amazing sound for admiring, but just as fluctuations caused by the tension of the throat, which do not touch the soul in any way. The inaudible energy flow, which keeps changing in a specific way, is not similar to itself, being expressed in harmoniously variable sound combinations. It is only some kind of frequency change in the energy environment of a human being, but it is certainly not a way to bring forth tears of delight, which are a rudiment for creating impressions of the world required by human psyche. Silence is a world of energies that are elusive to human hearing, but a world does not release you from its presence. Invisible worlds around the planet are not audible to you, but they are full of sounds caught by their inhabitants. Sounds are important for invisible entities too, because they designate the boundaries of their world, and thus save from the transforming, distorting influence of other worlds. Sound, therefore, is the designation of those limits beyond which the domain of the transforming effect lies. By invading it, you incur danger to yourself if you penetrate too deeply. If a living organism does not perceive any frequencies as audible sounds, then these rays do not act upon it as a field of death. Low-frequency gales of the ocean, for example, are similar to the pipes of the apocalypse. They start to sound under certain conditions, and then people go mad and just disintegrate, fall apart, pass into a world of other frequencies. The conditions for the origin of sound are some changes in the Earth's mantle. It becomes worked up excessively due to the chemical processes taking place in it, and low-frequency radiation penetrates, among other things, through the Earth's crust and the water column above it. If this is not the bottom of the ocean, but land, then the land in this place caves in, or a destructive field appears. People suddenly experience an inexplicable horror in such a place, and even vanish without a trace. This is preceded by a low-frequency, booming and threatening sound. It may be called the roar of the earth, although it is not deafening. What John described as the pipes of the apocalypse is the devastating low-frequency sound emitted by the earth, and it leads to the destruction of flesh. The menacing sound which you hear sometimes, as if coming from heaven, means that the separation of mankind from its flesh is about to happen. This is a warning sound, not a destructive one, but which of you, having heard it, took it as a sign of the coming transformation of the world, when only a few will find salvation, and as a sign that you need to look for a way out through self-improvement. Sound is the most important part of your life, and it has so many meanings which you are not aware of. When an artist creates, his colors are inside him, and he simply transfers them to the canvas in such a way that the piece of art sounds like a symphony in the spectator's soul. Even if not all spectators hear the canvas literally as music suddenly coming from nowhere, but the fact that their contemplation brings them pleasure, as music, means that their souls have swiped this melody off of the canvas. That is, the canvas was able to sound for the soul, and its transformation is sure to happen, for the inner hearing that found nourishment in the world of physical silence was applied, and therefore strengthened. Hearing spiritually, you are preparing yourself to distinguish the voices of a world which sounds different. The complete disappearance of the universe from the state of being will be soundless, for the last energy impulse, breaking into neutrino, is no longer opposed by any other environment.